We're continuing in our series on the focus on love being Valentine's month. And so this morning, we're looking at a sermon called Barriers and Best Practices in Love. I don't know how true the story is, but it's really good for the telling value. It seems the world-renowned physicist Albert Einstein and his driver were actually moving towards another university talk. And as they were heading to this college campus, to the lecture hall, Einstein had this idea. He spoke to his driver and said, "Well, friend, I really don't feel like doing the lecture tonight. But I think you've heard me enough to have it all in your memory. And I think you'll do a good job speaking in my place." "Well," said the driver, "do you really think so?" And then the driver said, "Just imagine if they asked us a tough question from the floor, where that would go." Well, Einstein said, "Don't worry at all. There usually are no questions. You'll be good. Just let's do it." And so the ruse was planned. They would change clothes and switch roles. And even as they got on campus, the driver was accoladed the welcome appropriate to this great famous physicist, and Einstein got humbly tagged along as the driver. The lecture moment came. It went on brilliantly well. And as Einstein said, "Wow, he really did it," kept the words. And at the end of it, much to the dismay of both the driver in disguise and Einstein seated there, somebody stood up and asked a very detailed question about an obscure point in the theory of relativity. And the driver looked at Einstein nervously, and then suddenly the light bulb came on. The driver said, well, thank you. That's a great question, but it's so simple, so I'm going to ask my driver out in the audience to answer that for you." Well, my friend, very many times in the Valentine season, when you think of life's questions sometimes, they get really complicated. For example, why do two people who walk together in a wedding day, who want to share all their lives together, turn around some years later and literally want to kill each other? The story is told of a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. Somebody went up to the man and said, "Well, sir, in these 50 years, did you ever think about divorce?" The man said, "Divorce, no. Murder, yes." I was driving back from church some days ago, and even as I was driving, I tend to listen to radio podcasts with news in them, and I was listening to one of those internet podcasts with news, and even as I was driving, they were talking about the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau. It was the 27th of January 2025, and somehow just the mention of the Holocaust always rattles me. And I began to cry uncontrollably, not able to see where I was driving. Suddenly I felt as if the bottom of my heart was just breaking apart. I cried like a baby and pondered that question: how could human beings do this to other human beings? How could people be so treacherous and careless that they would take away the lives of 6 million innocent Jews and millions more of people in those gas chambers under Nazi rule? It seems illogical, it seems unreal. But as I thought about the Holocaust, I also thought about what's happening right now in today's world, where you find terrorist groups are still killing and harassing people. And only yesterday, one of you in this congregation told me how complex it is for you to process that in the Middle East right now, you have a hostage exchange that just took place with 3 hostages from one side being released and about 100 from the other. What is the estimation of every human life? If only we had a world of more love. Barriers to love, what could they be? Turn in your mind to the scripture on the screen from the book of Ephesians chapter 4, and would you kindly help me by reading along with me? And as you read, ponder the force of those words. Let's read together, please. "Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in God God forgave you. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. I marked the get rid part. Get rid of what? Of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, every form of malice. These are barriers to love. Now, on a different topic, it's my privilege and duty every Sunday afternoon to clear the garbage at home. You got the recycle and the wet waste. And I always think Monday morning, those faithful people, they never miss. They turn up to pick the garbage. It's not an easy job. How long has it been since you said thank you to the people who cleared garbage? From time to time, Miriam and I have been fascinated by the work they've done, and we've taught our kids too, so we'd write a note to the garbage person. You can't call them garbage person, the person who cleans the garbage. Let's be respectful the way we say that. I apologize. They're not the garbage people. The people who clear our garbage respectfully. We write a little note to them and say thank you. Christmas time, there's always a waiting moment when I plan my day so that I'm right there on that Monday morning, get away from office, and wait for them to come so that we can hand over a bag of candy with a thank you note. And you know, it's so touching always when when you give the candy, you wave by, pump, pump. And the garbage truck, was saying thank you. So if you didn't do it so far, you still have time. Do it. It's a blessing. But imagine this evening I get all inspired and I tell Miriam, well, Miriam, I want to tell you something. I've theologically thought about this subject very deeply. I think this is a very spiritual thinking I've had. And I think taking out garbage was a stinking bad idea. Imagine, I think it's a great idea to leave the garbage just there undisturbed, peaceful. It's one job less. Clearing garbage. Whose idea was it anyway? It wasn't mine, by the way. Just imagine, I insist that for the next 4 weeks, we ain't clearing no garbage from our house. We're just going to leave all the wet waste right there in the kitchen. And imagine I tell the family, we're going to be singing that song that the Beatles sang years ago when it came to our garbage. Let it be. My friend, it won't take long before my family will be singing another song by country singer John Denver. It'll be, I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Uncleared garbage stinks. Uncleared bad attitude does worse. Think about these human stories. Sally and Mark were looking forward to a very meaningful marriage. And when they had their wedding day with the confetti flying, they said, here we come. But Sally had been through a really rough time as a young girl. She'd never known the love of her mom. And so she yearned it in this young man, Mark's mother. But something happened that would change the trajectory of their relationship. Because in the very first week of their marriage, like a bolt from the blue, came hard words, harsh words, angry words from Mark's mom to Sally. Sally, who was already carrying the burden of being unloved as a young person, found it very hard to process and overcome the pain. And the memories of those words clung on for years. Over the years, the bitterness became a formidable barrier to love. Have you experienced something like that? Move to another human story. I grew up with bad memories of an angry dad at home, said Destiny. He came home drunk. He abused my mom. He raised his hand and beat me many times. And then he ended up in prison. Years later, he wanted to change his life and came out of prison, reached out to me and said he was really sorry and wanted to let me know that he loved me. But Destiny says the memories of his rage just would not go away from my mind. And so for Destiny, those became formidable barriers to love. In another circumstance, a very peaceful neighborhood experienced relational turbulence after a particular new family moved into the development. The new family began to spread gossip and rumor and slander. They were outwardly pleasant personalities, but by their malicious words and devious ways, they ended up dividing a whole peaceful community. Soon the rivalries became strong and expressed. Like in the battlefields of modern warfare, everyone on the other side becomes the enemy. Like the wars right now prevailing in Ukraine and Russia, in Israel and Palestine and the Gaza Strip, they've been fueled by the underbelly of distrust, hatred, and selfishness. So just like today, that peaceful community was shaken and divided by slander and brawling. They were separated by walls that were barriers to love. As you're listening this morning, you're probably saying, yes, that's true. The world is a broken place. But maybe for some of us, the light is slowly shining in our direction because we realize we too are experiencing barriers to love. How can I overcome barriers and actually engage in best practices in love? I want to go to a verse that I began with last week, or the week before. Let me take you to it. It's a very simple one-line verse, 1 John 4:19. Look at it on the screen. It says, we love, why? Thank you, because He first loved us. The foundation to loving others has been laid by the God of love. If God could love me the way I am, and even the despicable me sometimes, then I have a bounden duty to love even the flawed person. Don't think everybody is so flawed and you're the only right one. Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. I want to look at an acrostic using the word love, and I'll be very quick because lunch is waiting for us and we're going to have a great lunch. But let me get through this very quickly. L. I want to suggest a lesson for you. Lower the volume. You sound better. Just imagine saying these words with volume. It's all about how you adjust the volume. Boy, did I shock you with that one. Wouldn't it be sweeter if I said, honey, it's all about how you adjust the volume, isn't it? A whole world of difference. If you have to shout at somebody and you don't have a microphone in your hand, wouldn't it mean that there's probably a great amount of physical distance between you both that you must shout to be heard? So if you're close and you're shouting, it means you're physically close, but you're emotionally distant. That's why we're shouting. Think about these words in the scripture that teach me, lower the volume, you sound better. Colossians 4:6. Let's read these words together slowly and carefully as we think about it and process it. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Wow, you did very well in reading, by the way. The Bible's telling us, speak graciously. And will you please listen to this from your pastor? In the present environment of very heated political rhetoric and back and forth, as you watch the red and the blue clash in the eyes of the entire world, there's a call upon you and me as the disciples of Jesus. How can we make this world better? By speaking the truth, but speaking it in love. Before you want to hit that send button, where you're really flustered and angry, hold on. Just take a moment to pray about it. Before you post that social media post with all those angry words in it, just imagine Jesus is actually reading it and his jaw is dropping. Wow. How much more would you disappoint me, my boy, my girl? As you think about it, you and I can bring change in our world by lovingly and respectfully expressing ourselves. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now. And I wish I could look at your eyes and ask you this question, and I could look at myself in the mirror and ask myself this question. Do some of us need a serious spiritual mouthwash? Because the words we speak outside after Sunday morning is not found in the Bible, nor the hymn book, nor the worship songs of the church. And somebody who sees us in worship here listens to us on the weekday and says, wow, if this is Christianity, I've canceled it. And you and I became the instruments. You know what? Jesus said some things, and sometimes they scare the life out of me. Honestly, they do. I know he loves me very much, but they really scare the life out of me. And people say you should not follow God with fear. That's true. But sometimes in our culture, we forgot our reverence. And that's why it's important to hear him like he speaks it. Listen to these words on the screen. It's scary. He says, but I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will have to give an accounting for every careless or useless word they speak. I got goosebumps as I read that line for you. Lower the volume, you sound better. Oh, open your heart before you open your mouth, because if you did it in reverse, it's stupid. Open your heart before you open your mouth. Now, in the church that we used to serve in India, we had something called a marriage course, and I do not know where I left my handkerchief. I had a handkerchief with me, and typical of me, I could leave something and not remember where I left it. Now, my family tells me, you can remember poetry when you preach, you can remember these Bible verses, but you can't remember where you left that pen 5 minutes ago. That's me, by the way. So just imagine I have this handkerchief with me, and Nikki and Silla Lee, who wrote the marriage course, they have this recommendation. So imagine my wife Miriam is seated here, and we're having a little difficult conversation right now. It's not very easy to navigate through. We have those too, by the way. Pastors do have that too, by the way. Did you know that? Yeah, we're as human as you guys. Sometimes as stupid, even more stupid than you guys do. So here we are. So we're talking. The deal in this whole idea is that if I had, let me do this. Let me call this the handkerchief so that you can see something visually. This is my handkerchief. So the deal is, in this conversation that's very intense, we want to listen. We don't want to open our mouth first, we want to open our hearts. So the deal is this. They tell us, you've got to agree between yourself that whoever's holding the handkerchief has the right of way to speak. The other person makes a commitment, number one, not to speak in between. Number two, not to be thinking about what you're going to say to what they're saying, but to really listen to what they're saying. Because we're tempted to come up with an extra rebuttal, by the way. So when Miriam's got the handkerchief, the deal is, I'm just listening to her. And when she finishes it, and she says, okay, it's yours now, I take my turn to speak. You know, James said this beautifully in James chapter 1 and verse 19. He said, my brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Let me move to the next letter. It's V. Verify before you amplify. Yes, that's true. Verify before you amplify. I don't know if you heard this joke. It says, have you ever heard the rumor about butter? Never mind, I shouldn't be spreading it. Well, I know it was one of those kind of jokes. Yep. Known to be the worst gossip in her community, a lady came up to church. She came to the altar at the end of the service and told the pastor, "Pastor, I'd like to lay my tongue down at the altar, Pastor. I want to give it to God." The pastor said, "Well, I'd love to help you, but this altar is only 15 feet long because your tongue is so long, it's gossiping all over the town. This altar is too small for you." Think about it. Isn't it better to ask good questions than to make accusatory statements? Think about it from your own perspective. How do you respond best? Do you respond when someone accuses you, speaks harshly to you, or when somebody has a good question for you? Now, actually, doing the question part needs a lot more processing and praying. So let me illustrate this for you. Imagine there's a father who's very frustrated that his son, who's earning good money, is just wasting it. He's not investing it rightly. He's listening to bad counselors. And imagine the dad is speaking. He's angry inside. He's biting his teeth and saying, "Son, you're doing stupid things by investing your money the way I told you." They told you. I told you many, many times your friends are stupid. Stop listening to them. Don't do what you're doing. Or the dad looks at the son and says, "Well, son, you earned some good amount of money. Do you want your money to work better for you? Do you think you'd like to have the help of some financial advisors? I know you tried some things with your money and you lost quite a bit. And by the way, if you'd like to know more about financial advisors, I know some good people. I could tell you about them." What are the chances that the son would listen better to status 2 of communication than status 1? Good questions make for good conversations. Please plan your questions. Verify before you amplify even news, because in the town sometimes people say, "Hey, you know what? Did you hear this about Arun Andrews? Psst, 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 psst. I just want to tell you, this is a prayer request. I'm going to tell anybody else, it's just for you." Psst, 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 psst. And the psst, psst, psst continues to spread around the community. Please verify before you amplify. Jean Passepartout was a fictional character in Jules Verne's novel Around the World in 80 Days. It was published in 1873. I remember watching the series on television as a teenager in India. Around the World in 80 Days truly caught my attention. And the one line that Jean Passepartout said was often repeated by my dad, who has a great sense of humor, by the way. And my dad would often remind us of that line. What was it? Jean Passepartout would say, "Don't jump to conclusions, or conclusions will jump on you. Don't jump to conclusions, or conclusions will jump on you." We're almost done with this message. L, lower the volume. You sound better. O, open your heart before you open your mouth. V, verify before you amplify. And finally, E, easy. Be easy on people, tough on things. It's a world in which we tend to actually use people and love things. But the kingdom teaches us to love people and use things. Let me close with this reading for you from today's Our Daily Bread devotional. When I try to spend time with the Lord in the morning, I do some audio listening of biblical teaching. I do some readings from different sections, and I have a book in which I write my notes as I'm studying the Psalms right now for my personal work of coming to God. And one of the readings I do use in the day is the Our Daily Bread. And this morning, here's a piece from it. February 16, 2025. Win Collier shares a moment in time. A Finnish soldier in the 3-month winter war with Russia, 1939 to 1940, lay wounded on the battlefield. A Russian soldier walked his way, pointing his rifle. The Finnish soldier was certain he was going to die. He'd meet his end. However, the Russian soldier handed him a medical kit and kept moving on. Remarkably, the Finnish soldier later found himself in a similar situation, only the roles were reversed. A Russian soldier lay wounded and helpless on the battlefield. The Finnish soldier handed him medical supplies and walked on. Jesus gave us a central guiding principle for our lives. Matthew 7:12. In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. When Collier goes on to write, it's vital that we see others as not mere enemies or strangers, or people with whom we compete for resources or opportunities. Instead, we see their need for mercy and kindness just as we need it. And as we do, our posture and perspective will change. Then as God provides, we can freely offer them the love He's so freely offered us. And boy, won't Miriam be happy this evening when I clear the garbage.